Welcome to the Balanced Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Matt Southam. Here, we delve into candid conversations with entrepreneurs, exploring both their business journey and their secrets to maintaining mental well-being. As we navigate the balance of ambition and inner peace, I hope you find insights, inspiration, and invaluable takeaways in every episode. Thank you for joining us. Hi Stan, welcome to the show today. I want to start just by asking you to, tell me who you are and a bit about your background.
Thanks. Yeah, so Stan Woods, I'm the co-founder of a B2B tech marketing agency that's been around now for, 15 years, called Velocity. Before Velocity, I was the managing director of a tech PR company, and I sold with a couple of colleagues, sold the PR company to Omnicom, which is kind of a be careful what you wish for moment for me. And then Velocity, we're now part of the Next 15 group. We sold the business in 2016, 2017. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, so you've been involved in PR and marketing with regard to those tech firms, but during that period, tech has changed quite a lot, hasn't it? It changes at such a fast pace. What have you seen change during your time?
I remember vividly, one of my big clients in the PR world was Cisco, and Cisco was like a behemoth of the internet. And in around about 1993, 94, when the Netscape Navigator kind of appeared, I remember him saying to me, "Have you surfed?" And, not really understanding at that point what he meant. Was he talking about the kind of outdoors activity? But of course he wasn't. He was talking about browsing. And that was a moment where we had this PR company. We were quite a big PR company, great clients, Philips, IBM, a whole bunch of kind of big tech firms. And we're in this intermediary business, where we're matching clients with journalists effectively. Yeah. And a realization that if this thing takes off, then probably it's the end of PR. And it still astonishes me now, 25, 30 years later, that the PR companies are still so successful, because it feels like, what the hell are they doing? It's quite a surprise.
Yeah, I guess they are just sort of bridging that gap. But we've seen the way brands present themselves, is slightly different with regard to, PR and now influencers and social media. And that change has sort of just been sprung upon us.
Yeah, I think that's a really big change. But a bigger one for me in B2B tech, you asked for change over that period. The difference between marketing being non-accountable and being accountable. That's the huge change for me that's happened in my career. I used to go to clients and, I'd suggest a campaign and they say, well, that sounds good, but how much does it cost? And you say, whatever it was, £100,000, £200,000 or whatever. And they say, yeah, well, what do I get for that? And my answer was, trust me, I'm good at this. Yeah. And in the post accountable world, brought about by companies like HubSpot and Marketo and Eloqua, remember them? You wouldn't say, what do I get for my 100,000? You would say, well, spend 50, and if it works, spend 400. And so that difference, I was actually interviewing for our blog John Miller, who's the founder of Marketo, and Engagio, and was recently the CMO of Demandbase, that ABM powerhouse. He's a serial Velocity client, and I was asking him, and how's this changed? And he has basically come to the conclusion that the maths and the science that he brought to the world that transformed a CMO's life has gone too far. And that what he thinks is that companies should now be spending 40% of their marketing budget on brand, astonishingly, thing that's hard to measure or even impossible to measure.
Yeah.
Because only 5% of target prospects are in market to buy at any one time. That means that 95% of your target prospects are not in the market to buy, and they don't want to be bombarded by emails and have people calling them up and saying, you downloaded our crappy ebook. Do you want to buy?
Yeah.
You have to have different tactics for those 95%. So that's, to me, it's interesting, that change to accountability. I remember seeing Marketo, the platform, for the first time. We had a client that was experimenting with it back in, 2008 or something like that. And looking at my partner, Doug Kessler, and across the kind of smoky room, raising our eyebrows, because we thought that B2B marketing had completely changed, because you could measure just about everything, and that would be scary unless we got to grips with it. And that's what we tried to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is that little bit of a journey in there, because, I mean, there's the famous saying about, only half of marketing works, but you don't know which half, sort of thing. But then data sort of changed that, as in you could test, measure, open rates, where a link has come from, how someone's landed on your website, all of that. But then as we move into brand, actually, yes, there's brand mentions and things like that you might be able to monitor, but it's people's perception. And people's perception is very tricky to monitor.
Yeah, it's partly due. I'll come on to the brand thing in a moment, but it's partly due to the fact that the whole maths-driven, science-driven data analytics and insight that's underpins marketing, B2B marketing certainly today, actually isn't working that well at the moment. And over the last probably 3, 4, 5 years, just about every client we see, and all of our clients are tech firms, and they're of various sizes. From Workday at the top of the hierarchy, all the way down to a startup that's got no customers. But all of them are suffering from this pipelinitis. That their pipeline isn't good enough. And they're spending a fortune. The costs are going up. Google, has a virtual monopoly on kind of search, and the cost is going up, and the results are going down. And and yet every single dimension of B2B marketing is measured up the wazoo. So you've got like an SEO discipline, and in most companies you might have a paid and an organic one. So you've got a couple of silos there. Then you've got the email marketers. That's a silo, different data. And whichever way you look, there's silos of data, and none of this data is connected. But everyone's working furiously in their own swim lane, and but the result is costs are going up. And pipelines are less and less predictable. It's often, in our experience, driven by VCs and private equity people who bring their own kind of marketing automation or marketing operations model to the table. And everyone, how's it going this month? How's it going this quarter? And that mindset, I think, is driving driving people outside the marketing department, like the CFO and the CEO, crazy, because they're not seeing these results that they were promised now. And so brand, going back to your question, brand is becoming, brand is becoming important. So you want to register, own that space in your prospect's mind about what you stand for. But the whole company is set up to only give a shit about insight and data and so on. There's kind of like, it's like two millstones grinding some grain. They're kind of working. They're coming at different directions and not necessarily with a good result. So we're seeing a lot of disillusionment out there with the way that. Go-to-market strategies are going, that frustration. We're trying to, you know, talk about a new B2B go-to-market playbook that kind of tries to integrate all of those sources of data, but also focuses on maybe a broader definition of branding, um, uh, that incorporates things like organic SEO as part of your branding strategy. I mean, or, webinars, seminars, private events, kind of part of that kind of branding effort. Um, it feels like we've neglected engagement, over the last
Yeah.
10 years. That it's like a gumball machine, as the Americans would say. You put money in and leads come out at the other end. That's kind of how people see it. But what they've forgotten is that, that's only one part of the recipe. That there are other, to make the cake, there are lots of other things.
Yeah, and I guess is there a distinction between the business brand and maybe the founders, the leaders, their personal brand, because we very much see that in some of the biggest companies, and that actually it's the leader that's got the largest following, and their personal brand actually helps propel, because the trust in them transfers over to what they're involved in a business setting.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a rock star business, B2B tech. I mean, you can, the company and like John Miller is a good example. His personal brand is at least as strong as and probably stronger than all the companies he's founded or worked at. And, so I do think this tension between the individual and the company itself. I mean, one challenge is, that individual branding gives kind of color and flavor and so on to a business brand. And when you get to some of the really big companies, Cisco's kind of a classic example. It's turned from being that, leader of the industry with personality and everyone waiting for, anything that comes out of anyone's mouth in Cisco, to just one of those legacy companies, still huge, still vital, still with infrastructure on which every internet in the world is based, but just not as interesting as it was before because they don't have any personalities. I remember one of their, I don't know if you know about Cisco, but Cisco was formed in the Stanford University network, like Sun.
No, I didn't know that.
That's what Sun stands for, Stanford University Network. So they were formed just about at the same time, Sun a little bit earlier, by a husband and wife team. And they sold the business, or they got VC involvement and they stepped down. And a guy called John Morgridge became the CEO. And he, when I was in my PR world, we were doing a big event with all the European business press in Paris, and we did it in the Hotel Crillon, which is on the Place de la Concorde, big 5-star kind of thing. And he was famous for winning the Business Week's best return on investment, like 5 years in a row for shareholders. And he took me aside and said, we're walking along the road and we've got, the FT and Corriere della Sera, all of the big business titles coming on, about 40 of them around. And he said, if you want to work with Cisco again, choose the Novotel the next time, because we need to save our money, and I'll give it back to shareholders. We had a kind of a big debate about it. I managed to persuade him that these people are not particularly impressed by going to the Novotel, but they might come to the Crillon. But that Cisco had those personalities in the back, but they don't now, and so they're rather faceless kind of. So I agree with you there.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess, talk to me about growing the business. I mean, how have you found that? And obviously you've managed to, sell as such and merge into other things. How's that journey been? How did you learn business, I think is maybe my question.
Well, I turned up, my background is, I started out as an academic. I was teaching at Aberdeen University. I was in a defense economics, the impact of defense spending on economies and strategic studies and things like that. I got into military intelligence in the Ministry of Defense just after the Falklands War, so I'm pretty long in the tooth. And it was I was the Soviet Navy analyst at the Ministry of Defense when there was such a thing as the Soviet Union. But I had all these friends in the 80s, the loads of money days, and I knew I wasn't going to make as much money as my friends if I stayed in the civil service. So I kind of jumped out and lucked into a couple of consulting type jobs and ended up in PR. And I think the company I worked for was called A+. And I think I was the 8th or 9th employee. And I didn't really know what PR was, but once I discovered that what you had to do was take a new product story and try and sell it to journalists and get them to print those, I realized I wasn't going to be very good at that, and so but I was quite good at new business, and so I started to do that, and the company started to grow. So I was the head of new business, and I did some PR on the side. I had a team and stuff like that did most of the work, and then as the company grew, I became the managing director, and I was 30 or something like that, and I didn't know anything about business. I faked it essentially, and I had to make all of these decisions that you have to make in terms of running a business, like who to hire, who to fire, I guess, how to grow, how to hit targets, which clients to work with. And, you learn a lot when you're thrust into those kind of situations. And I guess I was a very ambitious kind of person, and I suspect not a very good manager in those days. And I was really obsessed by growing the business, and I put too much emphasis on the growth of the business, to the extent that when we were 20 people, it was an absolutely fantastic place to work and really good. And when we were 40, we were really, really very good indeed. When we were 60 or 70, we were pretty good. And by the time we got to 80, 90, 100, we were distinctly average, because I had, as the leader, I hadn't paid enough attention to the only thing that matters in running an agency, which is the quality of the people. I was kind of just trying to win new business, saw that as my role, and in a way didn't pay enough attention. And so the quality of our work went down, and culture eats strategy for breakfast, as they say. And I didn't pay any attention to that. And when we sold the business to Omnicom, as I said, be careful what you wish for. We were delighted, but they didn't really, unsurprisingly, have the same vision for our business as I did. And so there was a kind of clash. And so within I would guess a year or two, I couldn't wait to get out. And when I left, it was right at the time of the internet bubble bursting, so 2001, March 2001, whatever. It was I kind of couldn't wait to leave, but it was the worst time to start an agency. And I'd met Doug. We'd met through a kind of mutual client. And he'd always been a freelance. He's an American copywriter, the best B2B copywriter, on the planet. And he was just beginning to think about, maybe I want to build something that's more than just a freelance career. And so we got on well. And it was a little bit like trying to encourage a spider out of a cave. He was so happy in his life as a freelancer that he was super ultra cautious about growth, which was a great antidote to me, because I'd been mainlining growth for 10 years or something. And so but I'd learned this lesson that culture is really important and the quality of people is really important. And that was a epiphany for me, because as we, Doug became the creator. Well, we had 7 or 8 years, just the two of us working essentially as freelance contractors.
Okay.
What we would do, startups mainly would come to us and we would help them with their story. And because the bubble had burst, everyone thought these companies were going to go public, but really they weren't anymore. And so we were putting lipstick on those pigs. That was really what telling a better story.
Yeah.
And so we developed this methodology for telling better B2B tech stories, positioning, branding, that kind of thing. And we did that for 7 or 8 years before we started the agency. And then when we started the agency, we were very cautious to make sure, A, we hired the right people, but maybe even more importantly, that we won the right clients. I had learned at A+, that where we took, any bus that was coming along the street, we tried to jump aboard. And sometimes it worked out fantastically well, and sometimes it was horrible, just what you were talking about before we came on air.
Yeah.
So I'd learned that it would be better to find clients that you melded with than just take a client. So we were very cautious. Very, very cautious about the types of clients we were taking on, and we were just a few people anyway, so we couldn't take on massive clients, and that really worked for us. And the people that we hired understood that we valued them more than the revenue that we were going to get from clients, and so that was just a huge piece of learning. And so the company became, more like a cult than a business enterprise. It was tremendous fun. It was at the beginning, I think we started the agency 2008, 2009, and we didn't have a business plan. So again, another recession. We didn't really have a business plan, which I'm told is the wrong way to go about it. But we just at that time, we'd done our VC thing before that I mentioned. We developed a methodology, which we call now the galvanizing story, to extract all you need to build this brand strategic story. Companies like HubSpot and Marketo were just being born, and so this accountable marketing was coming in. And these marketing automation engines, what did they need? They needed fuel, and that fuel was content. So we became a content marketing company in 2008, 2009. And I remember using Google to work out how many searches there were for content marketing.
Yeah.
And nothing through 2007, and this gigantic hockey stick in 2008. So we thought, well, we're sort of copywriters. Let's become a content is copy, isn't it? Let's do that.
Yeah.
And so we were, there was a little bit of, ambition there, which we thought this was going to be really, really important, but we didn't know much about it. But we knew just marginally more than our clients at that stage. And so we were able to parlay that. And then we invested big time in learning about it. And over the next 3 or 4 years, we became, even though we were a tiny company, we got quite a big reputation in the small content marketing world.
Yeah.
But that lesson that creating an environment by hiring people, good people, and looking after them first, rather than just trying to grow the business. That was a big learning for me.
Yeah, and I guess that is a lesson almost anyone should take, because particularly in the current state of play, which recruitment is particularly hard at the moment. So actually making sure you get the right people in and then keeping them is actually absolutely
that
critical.
Really happened during COVID. It was kind of a reminder of that during COVID. You remember that it was super tough in COVID. For the first 3 or 4 months, we all fell off a mountain, and you kind of thought, my goodness, is this the end? And everyone was talking about furlough or firing, all of that kind of stuff. And we actually were in our earnout with Next 15 at the time. So lower profits meant lower payout for us. But we decided that we'd assembled this really great team, and that kind of furloughing them or getting rid of them because the numbers weren't right was just unfair. Because they wouldn't be able to find jobs in this environment. And so we decided we didn't care about making profits through that period, that our job was to retain all of our people. And we had these kind of layers of the onion that we were trying to organize. Number one, obviously, was a hiring freeze, a salary freeze, an expenses freeze.
Yeah.
And then number two was, okay, the top highest paid people in the company, top 10 or something, we're going to take a 20% pay cut for the short term. And Doug and I would take a 30% pay cut.
Yeah.
And before we could then start to think about, okay, maybe we need to recalibrate costs here. The good news was that after 3 or 4 months, actually, we didn't need to do some of those things because the market began to pick up and everyone got used to working at home. But that kind of putting the employees first, which was it wasn't because we're great guys. It's because it was just a reflex of the company,
Yeah.
And it
was the
felt
culture.
Unfair. It felt unfair to do it.
Yeah.
That really helped us. We didn't lose people after COVID, and we kept the people that we wanted to keep. And it does feel. I'm constantly amazed when you hear these big businesses who treat their employees, terribly, and no wonder turnover is so high for a lot of these businesses. And it just seems to me to be a prudent way to run a business. Put the people first, and the work will take care of itself. It's so self-evident to me, but it does seem to be a left-wing view.
But as you say that, but I think you're completely right, because I think all of us, and actually COVID, if it taught any of us anything, it's that we're all fairly human with normal lives. Suddenly the pretext that we'd seen going to people's offices and things like that, suddenly you're seeing them in their home, and a dog is running in, or a cat's running in, or a child's running in, and you start to realize actually we are all quite alike.
Yeah.
And I think
it's an interesting one. Is now it's like we're back sort of to normal. We're in Richmond, so southwest London, and most of our people live, in places like miles away from where we are. And it turns out that spending an hour each way on the train isn't something that they want to do. And we've got this wonderful big 1930s factory building that we're in, and I think today there might be 8 or 9 people in, and mostly people come in on a Wednesday, but it's a real challenge because I get the commuting thing. I walk to work. I live around the corner. That's why we're here, so it's really easy for me. But I think if you're one of those younger people, I actually think mental health is a real problem working from home the whole time. I remember my daughter now, she's left university, she's working, saying she hated being in halls when she was at university because she was sleeping in the place where her desk was, and she felt that she could never switch off. And I kind of think that might be but it's a problem today, and people are not going in and meeting their pals and doing things together, going for a beer after work or whatever. I get it, because they don't want to spend the money or the time on the commute, but it feels that they are losing out on something. The result of that for us is we're actually leaving this office in actually about a month, and we're moving into the centre of London to make it easier for people to come into the office more frequently. Although I don't think it's ever going to go back to 5 days. And why would it? It's crazy. There's a
Yeah, I
whole
mean,
bunch of reasons why that wouldn't happen.
yeah, I mean, I now work from home. I had an office in the town centre, and actually having loved working from home and sort of going to the office, and I sort of, was really productive at home. Actually, I've realised I can do different work in different environments. So, it depends what I need to think about. And, sometimes I move around the house. Sometimes I use a bit of co-working locally and I rent a room there and the team get together. And it is a real balance of, the reason the office works so well is because you can collate ideas, you're all together, you can go out for a drink after work, all of those things. But also, I remember being in a very busy office, and sometimes the biggest disruption was myself. Coming in, talking to the team, and it was like, okay, this isn't working. And suddenly everyone's working from home and is producing a huge amount of work because there's no distractions. But then they're burning out because actually they're not getting up and out of the house.
Burnout is a real issue. You have to be kind of disciplined about like going for a walk or going to get a coffee or whatever. I think one of the challenges is in our business, creativity is obviously part of the offer, and create collective creativity. So most of our business is, it's not, we don't just sell copy or build a website or design a thing. We're doing all of that together at the same time. So our clients tend to buy three things from us. They buy that strategy, that positioning, that messaging, that storytelling. That's kind of the door that they normally come in. And then we take those stories and turn them into, campaigns and creative and content. And then we've got the third part of what we do is we measure and optimize the performance of those campaigns. And our clients are usually 90% of them are doing all three of those with us at the same time. And if you kind of think about where we started the conversation, this kind of online digital sales activation kind of skills, that our philosophy, as I kind of implied, is there are too many silos. We need to bring all of that together, and you'll be much more effective if everyone's working together on this outcome that we all want, which is, I don't know, more sales leads, more awareness, whatever it is. And I think we did a pretty good job through COVID in everyone rolling their sleeves up and working together online. I think we did a pretty good job there, like most companies must have done. But I do now feel that maybe we're going just a little bit the other way, which is not enough time to do that creative, joint creative endeavor. And doing that face to face is always better, because when you're sitting talking shoulder to shoulder with someone working on something, new things occur to you rather than and I think it's that tension, maybe not tension, but that collaboration that's
really gonna go. I tend to say often my desk, my home office desk, is actually just where I do the work. Once I've come up with the idea and I know exactly what I'm doing and what the outcome is, I can do it. But actually the planning stage, that other areas of your work actually need to be, whether that's collaborative, whether that's just in a different environment. Actually, I have different workbenches is probably a good way of explaining it.
You put your finger on something really important there, which is, you do your work, you come up with the idea, you craft it, you polish it, you sharpen it. I think online, when the interaction is largely online, you pass on that work to the planner, the developer, the designer, and they do their thing. And I do think that work in the creative industries today isn't linear. It's kind of circular. And I do think that by, like a rugby ball, passing the work on to someone else to do it, I think introduces a degree of linearity that I think affects the work, makes it not quite as good. And so you have to, I guess the way around that is to, like have these catch points, through the process to make sure that everything is hanging together rather than, a coat of many colors or to break
Yeah.
the analogy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it is. I mean, again, sometimes it's hard to. Sometimes working in the creative industry is actually the actual delivery of the product. Technically, you've delivered it. It's right. But if it's
Yeah.
missing that bit of creativity, which is
Yeah.
hard to necessarily package up, then actually that end product, what technically is right. Yes,
I
you've
would
got a
say-
working website that someone can click on and fill in a contact form. Yes, your website. But actually, it sort of missed the mark because some of those
I
early
would
bits
say
haven't.
I would say to the people in Velocity, yes, we're a service business. Our job is to produce stuff for our
Yeah.
clients, but really we're in the business of authority. People come to us because we know more about these things, these ways to tell a story than they do. And as soon as you start becoming a company that does stuff, alone. Of course, we make our money from stuff, but
Yeah.
but really, what we're selling is this expertise, this authority. We're in the authority business, not in the service business. That it's harder to deliver that online.
Yeah.
It has made a huge difference to us, though. Because 70% of our work is in the US with US-based clients.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I used to travel 15 times a year to the States. And now I don't travel at all, which is fantastic, because it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And so that there is definite advantage. I mean, and that's not even talking about the planet advantages
No.
and
Which
so on.
are massive as well, just reducing your transport
Massive.
and cost implication as well. The
Yeah.
bottom line is
I hate to think what my personal carbon footprint was
at some
3 or 4
point.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. But to rewind actually a little bit from what we were saying at the start, I suppose when we're talking about a service business and brands and things like that, technically I suppose the business sells products, but actually the reason people buy from you is the brand.
Yeah.
That's sort of a little bit about what we get with the creativity. Actually, people are buying into that. The business, yes, will deliver this product, but actually
I think
your brand and your
again,
knowledge.
I think that's right. I do think, you think about the businesses in tech that own that unique space in people's mind. I always say the 3 tests of a strong brand. It has to be relevant. Number one, the target audience has to give a shit.
Yeah.
It has to be believable or credible. That what you're claiming, people have to be convinced that you can deliver that. So, and then the third one is it has to be available. No one else is claiming it. And so that kind of, relevance, credibility or believability and attainability. Example I always use is like Volvo. When I say Volvo, everyone thinks safety, straight away. That came up in the 60s, apparently. And when all the other cars were talking about, speed and sex appeal and all of that kind of stuff, they went for safety. Their target audience was married couples with kids, and so it was relevant to the target audience. It was believable. Swedish auto engineers could deliver it. And it was available. No one else was saying that. But if I said I had a cure for the common cold, certainly relevant. We all get them. It's available because there's no cure for the common cold, but it's not believable because we've been trying to deliver this for a while. And that branding, you think about these companies in tech that have really strong brands. Apple is obviously one that springs to mind, but even companies like Slack. They're now part of Salesforce, but when they were starting out, fantastic. It was like a cult brand.
Yeah.
And the Salesforce, people get their tattoos stamped on their arms with Salesforce, and they wear apparel. These are cult brands. Most B2B tech brands, most B2B brands actually are in this kind of, if cult brand is to the right on the spectrum and anti-brand like Ryanair is on the left,
Yeah.
that most B2B is in the meh zone, right in the middle, because no one thinks about them as brands at all. And this is the challenge for most B2B tech. They're so obsessed with sales activation, rightly so. They forget about the whole brand dimension to their story, that people want to buy from people who tell stories where the customer recognizes themselves in the story. They want to be, they want, either because they're interpreting the problem the customer has in a unique or distinctive way, or because they're talking to them as humans rather than, I don't know, CFOs or development engineers or whatever. I do think it's good to hear John Miller saying people need to spend 40% of their marketing budget on brand. I mean, not only because I think it's right, but it's also something we've been saying since we started the company, that it's really important to get that, that underpinning idea out to the market. And if you don't do that, you're hamstringing yourself, if that's a word.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And your insight into that and background knowledge has been really insightful today. I want to finish off just by asking you a simple question of what advice would you give to someone starting up a business? What do you think they need to know?
Well, I think they need to know what they're good at. Number one, I think that's, and good to me is always to do with fun. If you're good at something, you generally enjoy it. And I see a lot of people in businesses, particularly in, I don't know how many people are employed in the creative industries in Britain, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
We're particularly strong in this area as a nation. But I see a lot of people running companies who aren't enjoying experience, and so I think finding out what you're good at and then trying to parlay that into something that somebody will buy. And I think it's about having a view of the world, having a point of view that is distinctive. My 3 tests: relevance, believability, and availability. Because most agencies, if we take agencies as a kind of segment of the creative industry, they look the same.
Yeah.
And when things look the same, price is the way that clients kind of think about it. And so that's what I was talking about with the authority. We're in the authority business. If we're only in the service business, if we're producing the website, then the cheaper website will often win.
Yeah.
But if you're in the authority business, you can actually build a moat against that. And so that, I think, is, I think really important. Find that thing you're really great at, better than anyone else at, and build the company around that. And then secondly, like, no man's an island. You have to find people that kind of, you can learn from. And, I think that's what's great about the people here at Velocity. They're experts in their domain. And everyone can learn from them, and that's fun too. Like learning feels like it's a really important part of having a happy career. And it isn't about money. It isn't about the money will look after itself. That's what I'd say. Maybe it's a little bit hippie-ish, that statement. So,
no, I do completely agree. I think so many people, you say about running a business and not enjoying it, actually probably because they're running it with the goal to make lots of money and retire. But actually, you want to enjoy the journey. Yeah, the journey is much more important.
You're spending 40 or 50% of your life running a business. You might as well enjoy it. I mean, it's really. I can honestly say, that I've over the last however many years, decades, that I've been running these 2 businesses. I mean, yes, of course, I've had really bad times, but I've never come into work thinking, oh, shit, I can't take another day of this. I've always come in with a kind of optimism. And that's to do with, the people you work with. And that includes the clients. If you can find like I said, if you can find clients that you fit with, who share your ambition to do great work. And often that's to do with confidence, that they're confident in themselves, that they can let other experts answer some of the questions. They don't have to, tell you what to do. No. They respect your expertise. So
yeah, I love approaching each day with sort of two things of one, what can I learn? And two, what can I teach? And, it's very easy just to be an authority, certainly when you've been in the industry a while, but actually to be able to open up and go, actually, I can still learn. Really
That's what I love about
you.
my job. I mean, I'm meeting these fantastic companies, doing incredible, work, software, whatever. And you're learning every single time about that. That's exciting,
Yeah. Stan, it's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you today. I mean,
it was
the
fun.
Insights you've had from years in the industry, and it seems like you're not slowing down at all either. You've spoken lots, that you're doing lots, but you're still going, and you're really keen to learn and keep growing your business.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I wish you all the best with that.
Thanks a lot. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
No problem at all. Pleasure. Have a good day. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.